Welcome to Cage Minds Uncensored. I'm Micah Frankel. There's a lot to talk about this week. Last week, kind of a slow week, but we still had some major boxing events take place. You had CES 50, you had Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series kickoff. We got more of that this week. In fact, tomorrow, you still got the Pro Fighters League returning, week 2 for them. We have LFA 43. There's the UFC Fight Night in Singapore. That is Donald Cowboy Cerrone versus Leon Edwards, top 15 welterweight matchup. And then locally here, Saturday at the Route 66 Casino. You can see it on ProView Network's YouTube page if you can't make it out live. The Legends Theater inside the Route 66 Casino hosts Legacy Boxing Promotions, Route to Glory 2, Bad Blood, a pair of New Mexico State title fights, Mad Max Heyman and Mad Mike Alderete in the co-main event, in New Mexico State welterweight title fight. It is a trilogy bout. They are the Bad Blood portion of this card, really, with their rivalry, their hatred. The main event, Josh Pitbull Torres and Christian El Puma Cabral. As long as I've been covering the local boxing scene, which I got doing a couple years ago, these two men's names have been linked. They're both in that 147-pound weight class, and because they became professionals, had been in the amateur ranks around the same time, a lot of New Mexicans for a long time had been looking at this fight. That's the main event. Got to give a big shout out to Mac 10, Edwin Ruiz, MMA CK10. When you're on Facebook, give them a like. I got to thank Edwin for so much support. He helps me and so many of the combat sports athletes here locally, nationally. Great hats, great shirts. I love repping the gear all the time. Thank you to Edwin and Mac 10. So as I said, there was a lot going on last weekend in the sports world. Terrence Crawford looking to do some big things. Gets his victory over Jeff Horn. Now a two-division champion. What's that, like 4 world titles or something? And now 2 weight classes. Big things for Crawford. Charlo beats Trout. Even though one judge called it a draw, I heard it really wasn't that close. The Charlo brothers are doing amazing things. But nobody's as big in the pay-per-view game for boxing as only 2 names. Canelo Alvarez and Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder is gonna happen. That perks my ears. A true heavyweight champion. 2 young, athletic big men. Klitschko kind of had calmed down. The Klitschko brothers had calmed down the heavyweight scene for a long time. This lights it and ignites it back on fire. Leo Santa Cruz avenges the loss against Abner Mares, which a lot of people call the bad decision. Now it's 1-1. Do they have a trilogy going? Oh yeah, I mentioned Canelo Alvarez. He and obviously Golden Boy owner Oscar De La Hoya used their leverage, being the bigger player in the game, and have beat Triple G in a submission with their terms being accepted. So we will get that fight in September. Finger crossed that we have no tainted beef, that we have judges that correctly know how to score boxing. Now in the MMA world, we had the return of Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. Wilfredo Santiago was just too small at 185 to get past Kevin Holland. Both guys ended with black eyes. It looked like a big overhand from Santiago had clipped and hurt Holland, but Holland recovers from that thrashing in the second round to outpoint in unanimous decision, keeping it long. Montel Jackson, a 3rd round TKO. Of course, great wrestling from the former Olympic candidate, defeating Rico DeShulo. Jackson will be in the UFC sooner or later. I believe we see him in LFA, and they didn't announce it, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a developmental contract. Greg Hardy, 57 seconds, 2 big punches, a knockout of Austin Lane. Lane was not of clear mind after the first punch, was out on his feet. The second one, just that now in the coffin. Greg Hardy, all of 1-0, but 3-0 as an amateur. It's 4 first-round knockouts. He's a big, athletic, devastating heavyweight, and that will forgive all as the UFC is moving and looking past his criminal history to give him a second chance, even though the Dallas Cowboys already gave Greg Hardy a second chance, and Hardy, after the domestic violence, did have a little drug issue, but his athletic potential, his fight ability, and the greeniness of this industry, they're gonna sign Greg Hardy. I don't blame a Jessica Rose Ellis a Jessica Rose Clark, who was a domestic violence victim, to feel mortified and disgusted to work for a company that's going to support somebody in this manner. The whole way of how Greg Hardy and that extra able to challenge the ruling and go read through the hearing, and then his accuser, after he was found guilty, didn't show back up, and supposedly she's a millionaire now. A lot of just shadiness around Greg Hardy. But we've also heard of possibly one of the Chechnyan dictator's top bodyguards being a member of the UFC. You have the fight game, and it's dirty, and I'm not giving an excuse. I'm just telling you how it is. The fight game is dirty, and there's some of these antics leads to a reasoning of how some of these things can only become so big. When you have, and people love to talk about the pay-per-view industry and talk about boxing and MMA against the WWE. The WWE is a PG product. When, like, former performer for them, Enzo Amore, was even accused, and it was a strong allegation of rape, they were done with him. They try to keep a lot more clean, cookie-cutter approach to marketing their stars than what MMA and boxing does. MMA and boxing is almost trying to appeal to that real, to that gritty, to that hardcore. The UFC also, I feel like, makes a lot of moves, like a second CM Punk fight, like signing Greg Hardy, saying, would Bellator do it? And that influences a lot. When, again, an ACB is gaining ground. This past weekend, Marcin held that leg locks are back, even though after a great run in Bellator, he shit an egg and did nothing in the UFC. ACB kicking it off great. You have something like that. You have an Adam Townsend, who was never given a chance, even though Dana White's trying to argue with us. Guys deserve a second chance. Adam Townsend, a winner in ACB this past weekend, and after a 3-fight win streak in the RFA, his thought was, why would I even try to continue this path if it's not going to lead to prosper? The UFC is picking and choosing, and in a top-notch, obvious example of that, Chris Curtis in the co-main event here of Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. Yeah, you forgot that's what I was talking about. I had went on such a Greg Hardy rant. Curtis, a dazzling display with his boxing, cutting up Sean Lally for the first 2 rounds. A hook kick. We're talking about some sweet chin music in the 3rd round. The TKO finish. Curtis, a big victory, but not impressive enough. Not a first-round finish like Greg Hardy. And not knocking him, but 8 seconds in, after a Deshaun Boatwright unset up front leg high kick, Alonzo Menefield just blasts through him, a right hand follow-up ground and pound, an 8-second victory. 57 seconds, 8-second victories. Menefield, Hardy earn UFC contracts, beating guys. Boatwright 3-1, Menefield goes to 7-0. Lane goes to 4-1. Hardy, obviously, an ultra spectacular performance. And when you think about Boatwright, was honestly, or sorry, not Boatwright, Austin Lane was one of the top American heavyweight prospects. Greg Hardy does earn that developmental contract if he's just a regular heavyweight. That's the kind of performance. His background, I would have stayed away from him from ever having him in the UFC. But Chris Curtis gets screwed because he puts together a full professional performance. The UFC is looking for a certain type of person, obviously, a certain type of personality. Curtis breaks his hand in this fight and unfortunately, discouraged, retires. Because to him, waiting around for that short notice call, which could happen after you went on the Contender Series, isn't enough. You win by third round knockout. You're the defending CES welterweight champion. I truly believe that Chris Curtis was screwed, and definitely with that awing look on Dana White's face. There should have been 3, if not 4 people just straight signed from this episode. Montel Jackson will be in the UFC sooner than later. And I also told you that there was some CES MMA 50. Some great finishes there. Adam Akavita gets the crucifix position, that Roy Nelson special. But instead of the pitter-pat punches, we're talking about devastated elbows, handing John Duma his first loss. That was a big one. You also had a sharp right hand, the hammer fist follow-up knockdown in a spectacular finish from Chris Kunto. Jose Lugo, 3-0, great wrestling, relentless effort, able to take the back, secure the rear naked choke, and submit Michael Taylor in the second round. Jeremiah Wells, some heavy hands, able to secure takedowns against John Manley in the third round after a hard second round, taking an unanimous decision win, becoming the number 1 contender for the now vacant CES welterweight title because of Chris Curtis' abrupt retirement after not getting, obviously, what I felt would have been a fair shake at the Contender Series. And in the main event, Dennis Paiva, Andre Ewell, the vacant bantamweight title. Great shots landed by both. Ewell came in with a speed and reach advantage, Paiva the power advantage, a knee brace on a reported knee injury. You saw the bigger headshots being landed by Paiva, stopping Ewell in his tracks, having him shake and clear out some of the cobwebs ever so often, but Ewell doing enough work to cause a cut over the Paiva right eye. First round looked like Paiva landed the harder shots. Second round, it was kind of back and forth. Early on the cut, late in the round, Paiva with the takedown, up in the air. Probably could assume the hometown guy was up 2-1. Paiva feeling desperate with an early shot, looking for that takedown in the third round. Shoots right into the Doris choke is what it's listed as. Barbara choke is what it was called. It was the ninja choke. It was that guillotine front choke with the rear naked choke kind of positioning where you're getting that right hand into the elbow, the left into the other crease of the elbow, and submitting your opponent. The ninja choke on Ewell, that reach advantage plays in with those long limbs being able to secure a guillotine like that. 13-4. I believe for Ewell, this is now 3 or 4 in a row. It's been impressive. We saw him in the LFA with a TKO. Before that, King of the Cage, I believe this is 4 in a row. The bantamweight division in the UFC and in Bellator, I believe both could use this guy. 4-fight win streak. Won, actually, 8 of his last 9. Andre Ewell should be on his way to the big stage after a performance like that on Friday night. Let's put a smile on Valentina Shevchenko's face. Nico Montano has returned to training. She's healthy from her slew of injuries and surgeries. And it looks like our first UFC women's flyweight title defense will be taking place in September. That's what they're targeting. That card already looks like it's going to have Zabit Magomedsharipov versus Yair Rodriguez. And not to mention, just last week, added to that card in theory was John Dodson and Jimmy Rivera. Got bantamweights, featherweights, women's flyweight belt. I like the lower weight classes being all featured together. Let's see if the UFC could do a whole card like that. Let's just go from 115 to maybe the biggest fight being 145, almost an homage to the old WEC, but taking it a step farther with some even smaller fighters, something I'd be interested in. Don't know how much everybody else would be. Something I'm not totally interested in, but I know everybody else is going to go ape shit for and just be in love with. The UFC has no soul. There will be no punishment for Conor McGregor. He owns them, obviously, and the UFC knows where their cash cow is made. You can't punish the guy that makes you all the money because you are money hungry and money driven. This is a profit-based business, and thankfully, he didn't fucking kill anybody. Conor McGregor, Khabib Nurmagomedov looks to be rumored for UFC 229. So what we're talking about, October, Khabib, Conor. possibly the biggest lightweight title fight ever. Conor McGregor, though, will be spending a lot of money before then and up into that time, which the UFC will probably like because now he'll need them for longer because he's going to have to settle things with the Ray Borg legal team, with the Michael Chiesa legal team from that little incident, not to mention whatever he has to give New York to be able to get away with a slap on the wrist, which is probably going to be a big financial donation. That's what's going on in the UFC. Bellator's been kind of quiet here. Paul Daly, still in negotiations, it looked like, could be returning to Bellator. His obsession with MVP could it play off. Michael Venom Page picked up his second knockout in boxing, and in true boxing fashion was fighting, well, a nobody. MVP picked up a win in the squared circle. Now let's move on to this week. I said again, it's the summertime. We got Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, and they are stacking the card. Tyler Hill, 8-1. Dwight Grant, 7-1. Welterweights kick off the card. Second fight, you got LFA light heavyweight champion Ryan Spann taking on Argentine Emilio Sordeni. Sordeni has put together most of his finishes by stoppage, coming off of a nice victory. Spann has been devastated since losing on the Contender Series last year, a man on a mission. Of Bellator and Glory kickboxing vet Giga Chikadze, who's training at King's MMA, has ran off 5 consecutive knockout victories in MMA over the last 2.5 years. He'll be taking on tough alum Austin Springer. Springer coming off of a 3rd-round knockout win, but has only won 2 of his last 6 fights, I think, including a loss on the Ultimate Fighter show, but did start off his career at 8-1. 6-0, former LFA, well, currently the LFA middleweight champion, because there is an interim champion also, but the full champion, Anthony Hernandez, in the co-main event, is going to take on, also undefeated at 9-0, a Jackson Wink Academy and Jackson's MMA Association member, Jordan Wright, the Beverly Hills Ninja. Jordan comes out with that karate stance, a very underrated submission game. His grappling is a smooth, not overbearing, but very effective style. Hernandez has power. He is non-stop. We saw that when he won the title. He is very relentless with his effort. His motor keeps on going and just keeps on going. A very, very impressive young fighter. That's just the co-main event. Then you got Matt Styles, 6-1, who is a knockout artist, taking on Yazin Hajin, a 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu Association member who has a couple knockouts and a couple decision victories. That's tomorrow night. That's tonight, depending on when you're listening to this. That's Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series on UFC Fight Pass. No fights on Wednesday. Thursday, the Professional Fighters League, PFL, is back. Second event, this one, Chicago, Illinois, Chicago Theater, Facebook and NBC SN. Main event in the lightweight division, Will Brooks, Luis Firmino. That one is exciting. Still, just a mountain of expectations about the potential of Will Brooks, even though he did not succeed in the UFC. The former Bellator stand-up, great wrestling, great striking, the size of his legs. Firmino, tough Brazilian, battle-tested, great jiu-jitsu, will stand in there and brawl. It should be an exciting one. Brooks is the favorite. Wrestling standout Chris Wade taking on Brazilian Nate Schulte. That one also in the lightweight division. You got the 205ers, Rakeem Cleveland and Rashid Yusuf, the undefeated Russian. You have in a women's lightweight bout, yes, women's lightweight bout, Brittany Elkin from Colorado taking on former jiu-jitsu gold medalist, the NBCSN analyst, Kayla Harrison, making her cage debut. A 2-time WSOF title challenger, Brian Foster, taking on UFC vet, great jiu-jitsu, Ramsey Nijam. You have Hani Marks a clinch specialist, taking on fellow Octagon vet who loves to brawl, Sean O'Connell. Islam Mamedov versus Yuki Kawan. Smalino Rama, the former MFC heavyweight champion, taking on former Bellator middleweight champion Brandon Halsey. You're talking about striker versus the horsepower of a big-time grappler. Great jiu-jitsu, Jason Butcher, taking on Max Grisham. Again, this is the lightweights and the light heavyweights being featured. Dan Spall, who did win last year on the Tuesday Night Contender Series, taking on Bazgit Atanyev, who is an 18-1 Russian prospect. Vinny Magalesh is taking on an Australian, Jamie Abdullah. Efren Escudero versus Jason High. Jason High will have Frank the Tank Lester with him. Has been working out here at the Jackson Wink Academy. High, I think, will have a cardio advantage over Escudero. Both guys are great grinders. Then also in the lightweight division, former LFA champion Robert Watley takes on UFC vet Thiago Tavares. This is a big uphill climb for Watley, an underdog, ranked like 100 rankings under Tavares on some systems. Tavares, power hands, great wrestling. You got to see if Watley is on that level. Contact, because he used to lose his contacts all the time. Hopefully Watley has taken care of that problem, or it could be devastating. The Professional Fighters League on Thursday night, I really am excited for this league, for this organization, see if they can live up to the potential, and still interested to see how these injuries, cuts, knockouts, how they affect the upcoming schedule. Friday night, Access TV has LFA Beaumont Civic Center in Beaumont, Texas, talking about LFA 43. Getting the main card going. You have Colton England versus Justin Prescott. You have Joel Moore in a heavyweight bout. They're two of the top heavyweights in Texas against Jeremy Hardy, at least ranked in the top 6. Women's action, Itzvel Esquivel taking on Desiree Yanez. Jordan Titoni, a scrappy grappler from Colorado, taking on Cameron Graves. Titoni has been on a huge win streak. Great at getting the back and getting the submission. Jeff Heffron versus Peter Stoyanovich in the co-main event. And in the main event, you have Brendan Allen, the former title challenger for the LFA middleweight title, against Larry Crow, the former Legacy FC title challenger. Crow with more horsepower, but has got caught and got knocked out. Allen has only lost to fellow other incredible prospects. He has lost on the effort. Allen comes into this one as the favorite. LFA, some of the top prospects in the sport, gonna shine on Friday night. I'm only going to get to take a nap, it seems like, Friday night, because then quickly in the morning, the prelims will be on for UFC Fight Night. For UFC Fight Night 132, the UFC is in Singapore. You have a full UFC Fight Pass card. Kicks off with flyweight. You got Yuka Sasaki, who is one of the biggest framed flyweights that the UFC has, versus Jin Laos. Laos will look to use his striking. Sasaki needs to work on his jab. He likes to use his wrestling, though. Does have a Greco-Roman background. Follow that up with undefeated Noki Inoue taking on Matt Danger Schnell. Schnell's chin can get tested and can have weaknesses. We'll see if the travel and jet lag goes against him. Yan Zun, she had a tough, hard debut, lost her debut in the octagon, looks to bounce back against Brazilian Viviana Pereira. Pereira likes to put her head down and throw brawling punches. Keep going on with the card. In the welterweight division, Sinsho Anzai versus Jake Matthews. Matthews growing into that body. His striking is improving, and I love his takedowns. Song Keen, who has good striking, taking on Hector Aldanin. Aldanin 4-0. A lot of belief in him, though, with this kind of opportunity, taking on a much more respected veteran. You got Rolando Dai versus Shane Young, the New Zealander making his octagon debut. Dai has not fared well. I look for the New Zealander to have an excellent showing. Song Yadong, who has big power, is going to take on the fun-brawling Brazilian Felipe Saranjo Arantes, a longtime vet. We've been seeing him in the octagon, a Muay Thai striker with some good jiu-jitsu who hasn't got on a roll. You got Taro Ishihara welcoming 8-1 Russian prospect Peter No Mercy Yan to the octagon. Ishihara has the big left hand. What else will he have for Yan? Kicking off the main card in the welterweight division, you have Li Jingling, who has big power, will walk you down, get in your face, taking on Dachi Abe. Abe obviously liked his skill because he's getting an opportunity like this. He has good technical fundamentals with his striking, but doesn't have a sense of urgency and may have some cardio problems. Jinling will come right at him. In a women's flyweight bout, this one a top 10 contest. You got Jessica Evil Eye and Jessica Rose Clark. This is going to be a brawl. I think that Rose Clark is going to try to take this one on the ground, while Eye looks to use her striking and keep this one standing, but it is a fun one there at 125 pounds for the women. Co-main event, top 15 light heavyweights, Ovince St. Preux, Tyson Pedro. Tyson Pedro, the top prospect in the division. Dominic Reyes is right on his heels for that notoriety, but I believe Tyson Pedro, the top prospect in the division, been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and martial arts for an incredibly long time. Full power, the size of a 205er, has the same height as OSP. We always marvel at OSP statistics. Only a reach inch advantage for OSP in this one. The Tennessee native has an issue with not being active, with keeping his hands low, relying on his athleticism. It has bit him a couple times, and you really wonder who is the better wrestler in this matchup. Both guys are ultra athletic. Both are big, full-size light heavyweights. They both have that one-shot knockout power. Pedro, the more traditional martial artist, has spent more years on the mat in the traditional art forms. The power, though, is equal, so that nullifies a lot. The collegiate athletic background, playing at a Division I school, playing football there that OSP did, that means a lot. That's a top caliber kind of athlete. The wrestling, I think, can play a big factor in this fight, but the jiu-jitsu edge firmly, I believe, goes to Pedro, even though Ovince St. Preux has mastered that Von Flue choke. I think in the overall game, Pedro has the advantage. Could be a big one there for the Australian. The main event, you got Donald Cowboy Cerrone, Leon Edwards is a top 15 welterweight matchup. Edwards feels that coming forward, Cerrone, he'll be able to find the holes, pick him apart, and get the win. The Jamaican has a nice wrestling game. He spent a lot of time in South Florida working with the former Black Zillions. Cerrone, fighting at a weight class that he's able to make, can fight. It looked like he got back on track in the last one. You saw a rejuvenated Cerrone. If he's able to have fun, he's able to win. Yancy Medeiros was the right opponent to get Cerrone in that right mind frame. You know there's not going to be as much love and hugs from Edwards. What kind of performance does the Cowboy put forward against the Jamaican? Both guys are strikers. Could the wrestling game be the difference? Edwards not the biggest welterweight, so that gives Cerrone a chance to put into effect that underutilized, underrecognized grappling game. Does have more victories by submission than he does by knockout, but you can expect fireworks because Donald Cowboy Cerrone is in the main event. Then Saturday night, we got some local action. Boxing takes the forefront. We're talking about Legacy Boxing Promotions, Route to Glory 2, Bad Blood. I already mentioned that it's been much hyped, long talked about. The main event, Josh Pitbull Torres, consecutive victories, looking very good back here in his home state. He's been to the Danny Garcia camp. He's fought Mike Alvarado. He's been in a plethora, at least 3, I think, title fights so far. Invaluable experience. Christian Cabral for this camp did take off, spent a little time out at the Mayweather camp, did get some high-level looks, but is it enough to really prepare him to take on Josh Pitbull Torres? Looking at the corners and the camps, obviously Team Pitbull is ranked ahead of Warriors Boxing. Warriors Boxing, the only serious threat. There's 3 of them there. You got Brandon Munoz, who has been inactive. You have Jordan Gregory, but he's more of just a tough guy. And then you have Christian Cabral, who's really been the big success story out of the gym. Long-time relationship with Ray Zamora. But the come on, son kind of advice that I've heard from the corner may not be enough to take out Josh Torres. Torres has a chin. He can take a shot. Cabral, we've seen knocked down. Even though the Pumas got back up, we've seen his legs get buckled before. Heart, both guys have 10 tons of it. Underdog, Christian Cabral knows it, embraces it, feels it. Pitbull called for the early stoppage because he knows he can buckle Cabral. This is an exciting matchup. You wonder if the body work comes into play. Cabral says his movement, his speed, his agility will be an X factor. I'd say in those elements, he is the more athletic of the 2 fighters. But Torres is the more technical, the more experienced boxer. I believe he'll Pitbull the favorite, Cabral the young, hungry challenger. As he said, as he recognized, he is the underdog in this fight, and he looks to shock the world. That's the main event. You got Mike Alderete, Mad Max Heyman. Mad both ways. This is a trilogy fight. A cut ended the second one. Alderete won the first one. Heyman is the favorite. As much as I talk to most people, you got him working with Manuel Naya. You got Mike Alderete working with Hector Munoz. Says he's ran more than he ever has for a fight before. It's going to be an interesting one. You have Ronnie Baca taking on Brandon Trujillo. Trujillo's tough. Baca's long. Can that prospect keep rising? Undefeated. Was once a nationally ranked kind of Olympic hopeful. Aaron Angel Baby Pettis taking on winless George Roybal. Another showcase fight for Pettis that we can't wait for that competition bar to be raised. You have Danny Flores coming up from Mexico City on short notice to take on Jason Sanchez. Sanchez, great balance, great in and out, great speed, and a laser jab. Look, the red corner seems to be very strong, I'd say, up until we get to that co-main event, and that's where you kind of get interesting. Other than that, the red corner heavily favored. You will have some prospects putting on shows. Can't wait to see what Christian Castillo comes out and does. Looking for another big knockout for him. Route 66 Casino, the Legends Theater, just west of Albuquerque, is the place to be for some live local boxing action Saturday night presented by Legacy Boxing Promotions. Got some local fights coming up. CageMinds.com. We've talked to Christian Cabral. We've talked to Josh Pitbull Torres, Angel Baby, not to mention Papitas, Matthew Escobel, and Mike Alderete in lead up to Route to Glory 2 Bad Blood. So get over to CageMinds.com to check those out. June 30th, a pair of events. Las Cruces, you have Southwest Brawl 8 presented by American Fight League. Go over to CageMinds.com. I've talked to Ray Viza, Dakota Monroe, Richard Jennings, who's in an amateur featherweight title fight, Wong Gandara, Randy McCarthy, and then at the Cage Minds Combat Sports News Facebook page, a 2-part interview with Sterling Peak, hanging out with him and his family at the park. So all that coverage of Southwest Brawl 8. Same night, up at the Buffalo Thunder Resort and Casino, you have the Jackson's MMA Series 25. We have articles up on that event giving you the info, the full card. We're going to be getting interviews up this week. Already scheduled. We'll be talking with Henry Barahona, Jess Martinez, Jesse Tafoya, trying to track down Josh Moreno. We got tons of interviews going up. Also look forward to June 29th. Don't forget, Access TV, LFA 44 in Phoenix, Arizona. You may see some familiar local faces on that card. Talk MMA with a little boxing sprinkled in. This has been Caged Minds Uncensored. Keep up with Caged Minds, cageminds.com. On Twitter and Instagram, it's at Caged Minds MMA. Caged Minds Combat Sports News on Facebook. I'm Micah Frankel. Thanks for listening.